All right, for more on this topic, we're joined by Dan McClory, President and Head of China for Boustead Co. Dan, good to see you.
Great to see you, Michelle.
So Dan, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump confirming that he would kill the TPP on his first day. Are you at all surprised?
Not in the least. The only thing I think is we should stop calling it the Trans-Pacific Partnership and call it Trump pulls the plug, because that's effectively what happened today.
I like that. Same alliteration. Very good. So Trump does pull the plug, but does a trade deal involving the same partners in the TPP, but without the U.S., make any sense? Japan's Prime Minister Abe seems to think it doesn't. Australia saying they still want to push ahead. What do you think?
I don't think it makes any sense at all. I think there is no alternative relationship other than RCEP, which has been put on the table by the Chinese. But certainly the U.S. isn't projected to be a part of that. And, you know, Michelle, if you look back just 2 short weeks ago, what were we talking about? We were talking about the aftermath of the election and somewhat economic threat and maybe geopolitical opportunity for China. I think now there's an economic opportunity as well as that same geopolitical opportunity.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that, because to your point, China was not a member of the TPP, and Beijing has been pushing its own trade pacts that exclude the U.S., the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. That's a deal negotiated among 16 Asian countries. Also, the Free Trade Area of the Asia-Pacific, that is open to 21 countries. So, Dan, the U.S. pulling out of the TPP, this all ultimately plays into China's favor, correct?
I think it does, very much so. Again, we saw the geopolitical opportunity in the wake of some of Trump's pronouncements. We're hearing it for sure now. But let's remember, Michelle, that neither Secretary Clinton nor Bernie Sanders was at all in favor of the TPP. So I think what we're seeing is the directness and perhaps abruptness of Trump's delivery in this pronouncement today. But the TPP was sort of long gone. It's just been formally acknowledged today.
That is a very good point, that either way, the TPP was probably on its deathbed. But let's bring it back to what this all means for China, because China, Japan, and South Korea, they're already in initial stages of discussing a trilateral trade deal. Does the fact that the U.S. is pulled out at large just give China more clout in any new trade deal that it now goes to negotiate?
I think it does. It very much does. And Korea and Japan, because they want to be part of the solution, they want to be part of the new arrangement, are being somewhat proactive here. So I think it's an acknowledgement that China is now somewhat firmly in the driver's seat and will be setting the pace, whether it's with RCEP that you've mentioned and I've talked about, or an alternative arrangement. And they're really going to fill that void that might have otherwise been led by the U.S. and kind of the Obama pivot to Asia.
Well, what would that mean now? Because the U.S., for example, had pointedly excluded countries like Russia, for example, with the idea that this will make them improve their trade practices and perhaps join at a later date. Now there are indications that Russia and China are going to forge stronger trade allegiances. But would this all mean that fairer trade practices would perhaps be diluted or subject to less stringent standards, perhaps?
I think they might be. Because if you look at RCEP, its main principles are the reduction of tariffs. It really doesn't go into opening up economies. It's not as expansive as addressing labor or environmental issues like TPP attempted to do. So I think what you're going to find is a much more pragmatic, down-to-earth solution that tries to facilitate trade by reducing tariffs and other barriers that might exist.
So, Dan, let's assume China and Russia do form an allegiance. They do take the leadership in these new trade agreements, and the U.S. does not participate. What would that mean for the U.S. in terms of its global positioning?
Well, clearly the U.S. is signaling that they're not going to be as activist or intervene as much in Asia. The Russian question is another one altogether. Russia is down to, very few friends and very few trading partners in the world. So Russia's influence has been diminished incredibly, whether it was the reduction in the price of oil, the brain drain of people leaving the country, the sanctions that have been imposed, the banking restrictions that they're under. So they really need to choose some partners that they can count on. So I think far less of any void will be filled by Russia. but certainly China is really in pole position to be able to assert, and rightfully so, its leadership in Asia, and for that matter, throughout the Pacific.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, and thank you, as always, for your insight. Dan McClory, President and Head of China for Boustead Company.